Whenever a person comes from a long line of people who have a reputation for something, we say that that thing flows through their veins. For example, courage flows through his veins, or kindness flows through her veins. But what really flows through all of our veins? Hi everyone, it's me Tanishka, back with another upload about the discovery of blood. Today we'll be learning about what the ancient philosophers thought of blood, the discovery of red blood cells, white blood cells, blood plasma, platelets, and the different types of blood groups, and what we think of blood as now. Also, I want to tell you something that my previous uploads, like the periodic table and the women and girls in science one, were done in honor of a certain day or a certain occasion in that which was celebrated on that day in the history of science. But for the discovery of blood, I'm just making this video to share some information with you. It is not regarding any day, it's just to learn and have fun. So, without further ado, let's get started. So now, how did the ancient philosophers think of blood? So the ancient philosophers based their theories about blood, or what they called hema, on cultural and religious beliefs. The ancient Greeks in particular were very ahead of their time when it comes to the study of blood. So you have noticed here that the Greeks used to call blood hema. So, in their language, blood meant hema. And from that word, we get the word hematology, which is the study of blood. In ancient Greek myths, we find the first mentions of vascular circulation of blood, which means that the blood can flow through the various different chambers, which are the arteries and the veins. Differences between venous and arterial blood: one is the one that is oxygenated, and one is the non oxygenated or the deoxygenated one, and the bone marrow as the site of blood production. So, we all know that the bone marrow is a soft, spongy tissue which is found in the interior of bones, and that's where all the blood cells are formed. The Greeks considered blood as a red bodily fluid which sustains life, and that death is caused by a lack of blood. So now we know that the blood contains a red color pigment called hemoglobin. We know it now, but back at their time, they did not know it. They just predicted on basis of observation. So the red pigment, which is known as hemoglobin, also carries oxygen through the blood and supplies it to all parts of the body. And oxygen is survival. It's vital for the survival of human beings and many other living organisms, virtually all living organisms. But there are some extremophiles which do not need oxygen. We'll come to those later, but now we are just talking about organisms which need oxygen for survival. So, yeah, they need oxygen, but for humans and various different mammals, the hemoglobin actually carries the oxygen, and hemoglobin is found in the red blood cells, which are a component of the blood factor. So if there is no blood, or if there is like blood is bleeding out of the body, that means that you might have an early death because there is less blood, less oxygen is carried around the body. So you know what will happen. Now let's come back. We know that blood is a red bodily fluid until now. But do we really know that it is made out of several small components? Well, turns out we do. Well, in the year 1568, the Dutch naturalist Jan Swammerdam became the first person to observe the red blood cell under a microscope. An acquaintance of Swammerdam, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who was also Dutch, described the size and shape of what he called red corpuscles. Now, we know these red corpuscles as red blood cells or erythrocytes. Leeuwenhoek is also known to produce the first known illustration of the red blood cells or erythrocytes. The fact that our blood was only made out of these red corpuscles persisted for the next 150 years. Though after 150 years, we got to know that it was also made of different components. So if you see all these images here, the first one, the black and white one, is an image of Jan Swammerdam, who observed the red blood cells under the microscope. You should know that the Microscope was a Dutch invention, and by Dutch I mean it was from the Netherlands. This colorized image over here is the one of Antony van Leeuwenhoek. He was a very well reputed scientist. And this one is Leeuwenhoek's sketch of the red corpuscles or red blood cells. Moving on, but red blood cells are not the only components of our blood. The component of blood, known as blood plasma, was discovered in 1941 by Charles Drew. Blood plasma is a liquid in which all the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are suspended. Blood plasma is 92% water. And here is a picture of Charles Drew, the man who discovered the blood plasma. His achievement of discovering blood plasma is actually really like a great accomplishment, because back in the day in 1941, where he was in America, people were segregated according to race, and he did a very good discovery by breaking the barrier and discovering the blood plasma to prove that anyone can do anything. Science does not have barriers, as I've talked before in the previous video regarding women and girls in science. Well, let's move on now. Alfred Don, a French physician, discovered platelets in 1842. Platelets or thrombocytes are the component of blood that help in the clotting of blood. Say, for example, you're running and you hit a rock and you get hurt. So, wherever you got hurt, it will obviously start bleeding. Blood would come out. So, those platelets they actually help in clotting the blood so that less blood would be expelled out of the body. Because, as I told you earlier, blood is necessary for sustaining life as it contains oxygen and it also carries oxygen. In the year 1843, Gabriel Andral and William Addison simultaneously reported the first description of leukocytes or white blood cells. And by simultaneously reported, I mean that Gabriel Andral was in France and William Addison was in the United Kingdom, and they both found it at the same time. When they were not even collaborating, they just found it together at the same time, even though they were in different places. Now, you might ask me a question. Red blood cells were discovered in the year 1658, and white blood cells were discovered in the year 1843. Now, white blood cells are bigger than red blood cells, and white blood cells also have a more complex structure than red blood cells. White blood cells have a nuclei, have a mitochondria and all that, but the red blood cells do not, because the red blood cells need to make space for hemoglobin, as I told you, the oxygen carrier. So why did the white blood cells take so much time to get discovered? Well, white blood cells are just given the name white because, but in real life, they're actually, like, if you view them under a microscope, they're actually transparent or clear. And even though they're really big, in a mass of red, it's really hard to spot a transparent mass. So over the time, as our scientific like equipment developed, so we were able to see the white blood cells with more and more high precision microscopes. And platelets are even smaller, so they were discovered even later when very high precision microscopes were discovered. So here is just an image. I need to tell you that I got all the images off Google. So you see all these pink masses over here? They are the red blood cells. You see those purple ones which are really big and have some kind of a structure inside them? They are the white blood cells. So in this illustration, you can see what I mean. They've dyed them purple so that we can see them easily among the mass of red blood cells. And all those small specks or granules you can see, they're not granules in real life, but I'm describing them as granules because they're really tiny, are known as platelets, which I told you are thrombocytes and help in the clotting of blood. So now that we know all about the different components of blood, we need to get to an important factor of blood. It is a matter of life and death. Who discovered the blood types which you are all familiar with? Well, the Austrian born American biologist Karl Landsteiner discovered the ABO blood groups in the year 1901. So, the different blood groups which you are familiar with, A, B, AB, and O, were discovered by this one. the one which you can see in the picture over here. And he discovered them with a lot of research. He actually took 5 to 6 years of research to discover them, but it was a very groundbreaking discovery in the fields of science, especially medicine. Because if you accidentally get the blood of a different blood group, like a person who has a different blood group, the antigens which are found in the other blood group won't bind to the other foreign substances which are in your body, and thus it will cause death. He won the Nobel Prize in 1930 in the field of physiology or medicine. There are other systems of classifying blood other than the ABO system. One such is the Rh factor or the rhesus factor. In the Rh system, the blood groups are classified according to the presence or absence of the Rh antigen. So, whenever you have a blood group, you usually have A positive, B negative, A negative, AB positive, AB negative, and all that. So, the AB, ABO is actually the AB blood groups, and the positive and the negative is actually from the Rh factor. So, the Rh antigen is signifying the presence or the absence of the Rh antigen are known as the D antigen. The Rh blood system was discovered in 1940 by Karl Landsteiner, same guy, and A.S. Wiener. The designation Rh is derived from the use of RL of rhesus monkeys to test the system. So they apparently didn't think it was ethical to use humans, so they used monkeys, these rhesus monkeys. So now that we have known so much about blood, we know that it carries oxygen. We know there are two types of blood, the arterial blood and the venous blood. We know that it contains of white blood cells, red blood cells, thrombocytes or platelets, and blood plasma, and about the different blood groups like AB and O, and the positive and negative Rh factor. So now that our understanding of blood has increased so much over the years, what do we know about blood today? Today, we know blood as a bodily fluid which is comprised of the red blood cells, white blood cells, blood plasma, and platelets. Blood has many functions, including transporting oxygen and nutrients to various different body parts, forming blood clots to prevent excess blood loss, carrying cells and antibodies to fight infections, bringing waste products to the kidneys and liver, which filter and clean the blood. So, our understanding of blood has increased so much from the Greek times, because in the Greek times we just thought it was a red fluid, and now we know so much about blood. So, friends, I hope you learned something new today. Be sure to subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching. Bye.